Renegades, Book 3, by David Liss. Chapter 1. It's funny how you can change your life, mix things up, try new approaches to old problems, and still keep ending up in the same sorts of situations. It didn't seem that long ago I was on a spaceship, surrounded by friends, cooking up a moderately insane plan to rescue some other friends. I have a tendency to overreach, so I was also working on a scheme to liberate my home planet, which had been conquered by the Phatic Empire. On top of that, I wanted to free the Confederation of United Planets from the clutches of an evil goat turtle. Maybe a little ambitious, I know, but on the other hand, I had a spaceship. I had beings I trusted by my side, and we had all been upgraded with ancient alien technology that rendered each of us evil-crushing agents of mayhem. There were a lot of balls in the air, but I still figured we had a decent shot at fixing just about everything that was currently wrong with the galaxy. So, finding myself in a classroom with an oversized lummox hurling spitballs at me was not something I had planned for my immediate future. I turned around and saw about 5 rows back a kid with a face like a potato. He had tiny eyes and stringy blonde hair and an evil, gap-toothed grin. He had the same stupidly smug expression of every kid who had given me trouble all my life, but I couldn't figure out why this particular bully had it in for me at this particular moment. He didn't know me. I'd never spoken a word to him. I was the new kid, sure, but so was he. We were all new kids. It was possible he didn't need much of a reason. Spitballs come from the heart, not the head. He seemed perfectly happy to sit there with 3 or 4 other meatheads, moistening balls of paper in his mouth and tossing them at me. "Ignore him," Misan said. She had that look on her face that meant she was sure I was about to do something stupid, which meant I must have had that look on my face. It was easy for her to tell me to ignore them. She wasn't the one getting pelted with saliva bombs. I doubted she'd be a model of restraint in my shoes. Misan had never put up with anyone giving her a hard time, even without the ancient precursor alien augmentations we had swimming through our blood. I also knew she wasn't the most patient person, but right now her impatience was zeroing in on me. Maybe it was because I'd just been smacked in the forehead with a particularly moist wad, but I felt she was being a little unfair. I don't see myself as someone who goes around doing obviously stupid things. I may, on occasion, be a little reckless, but only when there is something important at stake. Yes, the thought of testing out my new nanotech upgrades on this kid, let's say punching him so hard he flew into the air and through the ceiling, had a certain appeal. It might have fallen into the category of things that a reasonable person, such as Misan, might call stupid, but I was only thinking about it. I had no real intention of unleashing the most humiliating beatdown in the history of nerd revenge. It was more like an emergency backup plan. Besides, we had more important things to worry about and bigger bullies to take down. Alice, who was on the other side of me, brushed some strands of her unruly white blonde hair out of her face and peered at me over her glasses.
"I can't believe you're gonna sit there and let that guy lob spitballs at you."
Misan glowered at her. "Don't give him any ideas. We're trying to blend in. Act normal." Charles, who was on the other side of Misan, now leaned over. "Would not a normal student resent this treatment?" he asked. "Is not confronting this ruffian a means of blending in?" There was a real uncertainty in his voice. Charles was from Uganda and didn't know how things in American schools worked. Maybe spitball pelting was how kids say hello around here. "Why are you encouraging him?" Misan asked. A spitball came flying through the air and struck her in the face. "I think that is why," he suggested. "Yeah, he doesn't want to get hit," I said. Misan was scowling as she used the nails of her thumb and index finger to remove the spitball that clung to her cheek. "You may have a point." I was starting to get to my feet when Alice grabbed me by the hand and pulled me back down.
"Hold on, Misan was right. We're here for a reason. We need to lie low for a few more hours, even if it means putting up with a little humiliation."
I sighed, but I had no real argument. After escaping from Confederation Central, things had taken a bad turn. We'd arrived in my solar system only to find my home planet under Phatic control. Then they'd taken another bad turn, and here we were on Earth, in this Phatic re-education facility. Yes, the situation looked bad, but I was being an optimist. Imprisonment, brainwashing, and spitballs, I told myself, were speed bumps on our road to success. I turned around to face my tormentor, who shrugged and grinned, giving me a "what are you gonna do about it" look. I glowered at him as best I could, because that was as far as I could go without giving us away. I remembered what it felt like to be powerless back when I was literally without powers. Now I was powerless even though I was incredibly powerful. If you ever have a choice, the second option is the better one, but honestly I don't recommend either. Finally, the classroom door opened and the teacher entered, which I figured was good news only because the presence of an adult would end the rain of spitballs. The teacher was in his 50s, I'd guess, and his fringe of gray hair, gray mustache, contrasted sharply with the deep brown of his skin. He wore khakis and a blue button-down shirt with a black tie. He also wore a grim expression that made it clear he would rather be anywhere else and do anything other than teaching a bunch of students. I'd seen teachers like this before, and they were best treated like wounded predators. Maybe a kind gesture would earn this man's friendship, or maybe he would bite off my arm. "Good morning, students," he said in a tone designed to make sure we understood that nothing in our morning was going to turn out good. "I see we have a few new faces today, so I'll introduce myself. I am Mr. Authoritarian Hammer, and I have the honor, duty, compulsion to be your re-education and obedience facilitator. You are here because your behavior has inclined towards nonconformity. In our new Vedic culture, individuality, experimentation, and exploration are all frowned upon, so I hope you will participate fully in this program designed to help you find your proper place in our benevolent society. Glory to the Empress." We had been hearing this sort of insane talk since returning to Earth. The Fads had been capturing and subjugating worlds for centuries, so they had a reliable playbook for planetary domination. Though they'd been on Earth less than a week, things were already running like clockwork. They had procedures for every step of the conquest procedure, from establishing subspace energy relays to forcibly recruiting compliance instructors. Authority figures who resisted the Fads, from world leaders to policemen, were injected with behavior-modifying nanites, which compelled them to enforce the new order. Plenty of locals went along willingly, though. My guess was this man had not actually been born with the name Authoritarian Hammer, but he had the hard look that told me that re-education and obedience facilitator might just be the job he'd always dreamt of. Kids who lob spitballs need careers when they grow up, I guess. "I have not been doing this very long," said Mr. Authoritarian Hammer, "but I have high hopes for my students. Please be advised that those who fail to conform to Vedic ways will be shipped to Planet Pleasant, where their disobedience can be studied and understood so that future generations of youth may better serve the Empress." I'd been threatened with Planet Pleasant before. Junip, the previously mentioned evil goat turtle, who had somehow taken control of the Confederation, had brought it up the last time I'd been on Confederation Central. It was some kind of super-secret Vedic mad science facility, and pretty much the last place anyone wanted to go. "Before we begin today's lesson in subordination, service, and the proper disregard for our own feelings," said Mr. Authoritarian Hammer, "I'd like our new students to introduce themselves. When I read your name, please rise and tell the group about your crimes against our benevolent and merciful Empress, and how you most hope to change in order to earn the privilege of continued existence." We knew this was coming, and had already come up with fake names that would help us blend in. We'd also agreed to say what we had to say in order to get along. All we had to do was survive in this school, without making trouble, for 1 day. I figured that even I could manage something like that. "Sally Applesauce," Mr. Authoritarian Hammer said, narrowing his eyes suspiciously at the name on his printout. Mi-san rose to her feet, and I gave her my best "that's your idea of an inconspicuous name" glower, but she ignored me. Maybe she thought that was a normal American name. Having spent a fair amount of time in a space station full of countless alien species, you tend to forget how much minor cultural differences of your own planet can trip you up. "Yeah, hi," she said with her customary gruffness. I am Sally Applesauce. I am guilty of breaking curfew, refusing to report to my appropriate re-education center, and showing disrespect to designated FADIC authority. In the future, I promise to give all FADs and their representatives exactly what they deserve. I hoped that those in the room who didn't know her wouldn't hear her the way that I did. Next came Alice, who had picked the name Betty Hill. She told the class she wanted to help the FADIC Empire achieve greatness. She tried to sell it, but she sounded like she was choking on a chicken bone the entire time. "Jean-Luc Pickard?" Mr. Authoritarian Hammer called out, one eyebrow raised with suspicion. I waved at the students who were now watching me with obvious curiosity. "Yeah, my parents, that is, Mr. and Mrs. Pickard, were total nerds," I offered. Maybe the name was a little too nerdy, but I hoped we would be long gone before anyone had a chance to look at my background. Finally, it was Charles' turn. "Anthony Stark," said Mr. Authoritarian Hammer. Was the full name supposed to disguise the fact that he'd picked Iron Man's real name? It was too late to do anything about it now, and given that Mi-sun had taken a stab at a generic name by calling herself something that sounded like a My Little Pony, there wasn't a point in complaining. Mr. Authoritarian Hammer proceeded with the rest of the roll call. After that, we stood, put our hands over our hearts, and, along with the rest of the group, pledged allegiance to the war banner of the pacified planets of the FADIC Empire, and to the ever-expanding homogeny for which it stands, one culture, under the Empress, with obedience and prescribed modes of conduct for all. We resumed our seats, and proceeded to learn how to be better imperial subjects, and help our Supreme Viceroy, Nora Price, the most esteemed colonial administrator on our planet. These lessons kept us busy until lunchtime.